Everything just changed for Tesla. Two of the most important news stories dropped yesterday. First, Secretary of Transport Sean Duffy announced new rules that will make it easier to roll out self-driving cars across the country. This is the federal framework we've been waiting for. Second, FSD was just approved in Norway. So while Tesla bears see Elon Musk making promises, Tesla bulls see game-changing progress. We've got the bulls here with us today. We've got Jeff Lutz, also known as Mr. Incredible, the Rational Bull. Joining us this week is Cern Basher, the Bot Bull, and Joe Bhakdi, the Pioneer Bull. Thank you, Joe. Appreciate you joining us. First time on Cyber Bulls. Joe's an economist, technology entrepreneur. He's a YouTuber also, covering Tesla and the coming age of AGI. Welcome, guys.
Hey, Herbert.
Great to be here.
Okay, let's get started with the first big giant news that just dropped. We got the federal framework here from self-driving. Secretary of Transport Sean Duffy came out and announced that they are working on a nationwide autonomous driving program. Let's watch what he said here.
America is in the middle of an innovation race with China, and the stakes couldn't be higher. That's why we're unveiling a new automated vehicle framework as part of our DOT's innovation agenda. Now, this framework, it has three key components. Number one, prioritize safety. Number two, unleash innovation. And number three, enable commercial deployment. So we're announcing two initial steps in this framework today. First, when it comes to safety, we've heard from industry partners the crash reporting requirements for automated vehicles, it's way too expensive, way too costly. But these reports help DOT monitor road safety. So to balance these concerns, we've streamlined the process in AV crash reporting to sharpen the data while removing the redundancies. We'll have much more to share on this in the coming months. The long-term goal here is to move us closer to a single national standard. We don't want 50 states with 50 standards. We want one national standard for AVs. Second, we're cutting the unnecessary red tape. Right now, vehicles made outside the country qualify for a quick exemption process. Meanwhile, AVs made right here in America have to deal with a stringent permitting process. This makes zero sense. Under this administration, we put America first. We've now fixed this by expanding the AV exemption program so domestic vehicles, they're included. This will encourage innovation right here at home. America has always been the home of innovators, from the Wright brothers to the first astronauts on the moon. Our nation has always been at the cutting edge of transportation technology. Innovation is one of my top priorities, and I can't wait to share more about how the DOT is bringing about the golden age of transportation.
Well, sounds like it's also going to be the golden age of Tesla. Jeff, why don't we start with you? What's going on and how big of a deal is this? The company and the product. I don't look at the quarterly stock movement.
A very realistic bull, questioning certain decisions.
The rational bull. I enjoy listening to bears.
Looking for the red flags. You're supposed to react.
The longer term opportunity for Tesla is like no other company that I've ever seen.
Very big deal. I mean, we've been talking about this since Elon entered the White House and really talking about weighing the impact of that, right? There's all these concerns. There's all these concerns about a blowback. But if you look at, the prior administration versus where things are now, we know we needed to have that proximity to the White House really around regulatory, deregulation, AI, autonomy, and bots, and just think in those three or so major areas. The big takeaway here to me is this is the beginning of a framework. They're directly attacking a few key tactical issues, but to me, this is the outline of a federal framework. And the highest order bit, the key takeaway here, in my opinion, is one standard across 50 states. Imagine being a company and trying to get a highly technical product, very technical software, hardware, infrastructure, and trying to get that qualified across 50 different standards. I mean, just totally nonsensical. Would have put us behind other countries that would have been racing ahead of us. And so the one standard across, I mean, that's to me the biggest takeaway. And to me, this is just the beginning of this. This isn't the federal framework. There is going to be a federal framework. We're going to start by attacking these tactical items. Looks like Elon has a close relationship with with Sean Duffy. Sounds like he's a great Midwestern guy, common sense, and it looks like we're on the right track. This is a big deal for Tesla because Tesla developed a generalized solution. They didn't develop a solution for California or Wyoming or Illinois. They developed a generalized solution that may require some amount of localization by country and certain driving standards, but in general, it's a generalized solution. So this is great for Tesla.
Thank you for that, Jeff. Cern, does this change your timelines? How soon that this came? Was it sooner than you were expecting? And how does your spreadsheets change because of this?
Yeah, that's a good question, Herbert. I need to, I think, take a closer look at my assumptions. I think one of the things that a lot of people worried about was that FSD would be ready, but it would take forever to get regulatory approval. And I think this gives some clarity on the fact, as Jeff just said, there is going to be a federal framework, and that clears a lot of the hurdles, right? And so this issue of, if you take a Robotaxi from California into Nevada, you won't have to get out of the Robotaxi at the state line, for example. Those kinds of weird things that could happen. The other thing that was going on is a lot of people, I think, were thinking that the humanoid robots actually may become a bigger source of revenue before Robotaxi would for Tesla. And I think that puts some of those concerns to rest because the humanoid bot is still in development, whereas it appears that Robotaxi is ready for deployment. And that's a very different stage.
Yeah, that is going to be one of the other topics we'll cover in today's show. So Joe, you and I just did a great interview. Appreciate you doing that with me. And the deep dive we did there was where you were looking at kind of the stock price and probabilities of what needs to happen when this Robotaxi comes out. And you did a fantastic job creating that. How does that list and those your probabilities, how has that changed given the news today? And we're not just talking about the federal framework announcement. We're also talking about FSD being approved in Norway. We'll cover that right after this.
Yeah, Herbert, absolutely. That was a great interview. And actually not much, because I always said among all these key things people discuss about Robotaxi and autonomous driving, I always viewed only one as decisive, and that one is, does the technology work? At what point can we have Robotaxis roaming around and doing their job? Is that point in June? Is it in August? Is it in December? Or will it take years? And you know my theories on that. I think we have a tremendously high probability that we see a technological breakthrough in the real world in the next 15 months. And our first shot is June. And I said that right out of the gate, because all the other points, can they scale? Can they manufacture? Can they overcome the regulatory hurdles? For me, these are all downstream, that big question. Because when you simulate the world, how it would react to that breakthrough, you can't, as a regulator, sit there and not take action because you have a competitive situation. We know that Texas likes that. We know that there are 7 regulatory, low regulation states in the United States, like Arizona and Alabama and Georgia and Florida and Texas, of course. And that's my favorite new word is robo-porn, right? When people see that robo-porn, like on the street, that these cars drive around and it just works and it's cheap and people are excited and you have saturation in any single metropolitan area, I think there will be a massive ripple effect across the world, because it's clear that some countries will move fast and then the other countries will look very dumb. That's very different with Tesla than with Waymo, because Waymo can never move, right? They cannot saturate these markets. But Tesla, once they crack it, they can swamp the entire metropolitan area within weeks. They can have tens of thousands of cars if they want. And so I always believed it's not a big deal, the regulatory hurdles. Still, it's important that we see that movement. And on the federal level, talk about brand damage, to Jeff's point, that's the flip side of the brand damage coin. Elon got the so-called brand damage because he is super close to the most powerful man in the world, the president of the United States, and because he is a mover and shaker in the most important administration on earth. So this flip side, of course, means that on FSD, they will have great input on making the innovation regulation work. And later down the road, they will have great input on Optimus and the national security frameworks and everything that's required for humanoid robots. So I think it's just a validation of the thesis that I had, that everything hinges on that big question. When do we see the roboporn of self-driving cars saturating an entire metropolitan area? And from there, it will be smooth sailing or smooth driving.
Smooth driving. Do you guys think anything has changed? So let's walk us through here. You've got the plans to roll out in Austin in June, 10 to 20 cars. Okay, and they're going to take it slow. So that's
on
fine.
day one.
On day one, that's what's going to start. That's going to still be the case. They're going to roll out at some point to California. They might roll out to multiple cities. Elon said sometime the end of this year. Then he also said, though, right? He said something like unsupervised FSD is something that could be rolled out to drivers by the end of this year. And maybe he knew that this was coming, that lets me drive have my car unsupervised and then let it be, approved that I can be able to do this while I'm sleeping. Is that what you think this applies to, or are they completely separate things that he talked about that?
I think they'll join eventually, but this isn't the end of the framework. To me, this is the beginning of it. And I don't believe there's a document on a website we can download that says, here's the framework across 50 states. It's a declaration that we're going to have one standard. And so that's good. Let's build in, if you're Tesla and you want to be part of some consortium that helps build in requirements to that, I think it's great. I mean, NHTSA is a very prominent organization. I'm sure they'll figure it out. So I think it's the beginning. I think Elon announcing FSD unsupervised for your own vehicle by the end of the year. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if that was your own vehicle joining the Robotaxi network versus your own vehicle just being able to drive, where you're able to lean back and look around and not have to be attentive, with the camera sensor in the car. So I believe that's what that is. And just, to me, it's symbolic of progress. And remember, we had multiple 10x improvements last year, and there's no reason why we're not going to continue improving this year. Remember, we haven't seen an updated model in about 6 months. We've been just working off of point releases on 13.2, which was originally released in November. So I think we're due for a big release. I think unsupervised for your own car, I always thought that was a next year kind of thing. And then definitely next year to put your own car on the network. So I think when Elon says something like this year or next year, I think you have to understand that that's a generalized response. That's not it's hard to say. It's not saying like by December 31st, everything is going to happen perfectly. There's a lot of variation in that. But when they say Robotaxi in June, and you have every level of management from the engineering lead to the engineering directors and VPs, all the way up to Elon reiterating June, everybody in Tesla reiterating June, and we're within, it's this quarter. There's a lot more confidence in that happening, and so I think this will build off of that.
Anybody else?
I think we also have to triangulate. When Elon says something, that's just one data point, Jeff's point, and we have to discount that a little bit, and we have to look at the surrounding data points and triangulate what's likely to happen. So on the June side, it's very likely to happen because many other people say it too on the Tesla team. It's also much more likely that they have Austin under control in regulatory terms and all kinds of other terms, that they have it operationally under control because it's a gigafactory next door. So this is very likely to happen. When it comes to unsupervised rollout to all customers in December, I think that's very unlikely to happen just for regulatory reasons, right? How are you going to do that? That's difficult. I think Elon sees it more technologically, it would be possible. I think there are many problems. And I am so bullish on a potentially faster rollout and faster ramp of Robotaxi because I see a realistic path how you would manage that and navigate that. Because you can play these different states and municipalities against each other. You can saturate Austin, then you can go to other Texas cities. If California wants to be a problem, Or in Europe, if, I don't know, Switzerland is a problem, you have alternatives. You say, well, California, if you can't get it done, if you want to be a problem, then, bad luck. We go to Arizona and we go to Las Vegas and Nevada because they are not being difficult. So that's why I'm bullish. If you are dependent on a singular regulatory entity, especially in California, they might screw you for 2 years. Who knows? And I'm pretty sure there is no path to rolling this out this year in California on the regulatory side, because you have to jump through all the hoops. They didn't even start the autonomy hoops. And so, that's how I try to triangulate what's likely to happen. And in Austin, it's just very clear that this is under control on all dimensions. And it's clear that you can very likely roll it out quickly in Texas then. And then it's clear there are low-hanging states that will just be up for the game. And it's clear that California will be a problem, in my opinion. So, but do you need California in the first 12 months? Probably not.
I mean, they're already doing it with employees in California. I don't think so. But you're saying if one of them does do this, then you've got, in terms of timing, there's this exemption. This is so weird, right? There's this exemption that already exists. NHTSA already has an exemption for imports, but not for domestically produced autonomous vehicles. That is so odd that that's what they had. Anybody know anything about this?
Yeah, I don't know the source of that. I wouldn't read too much into it, other than they may think the country of origin has some standard, but I'd be surprised if NHTSA would just rubber stamp that. So I wouldn't read too much into that. I think the biggest takeaway is getting to a 50-state federal standard. I think this is an overhang on the stock too. So it's not done. I just want to be clear. To me, that this is an announcement of intention to do that, and then there's still work to do. It's great that Elon is still close and has a relationship, very good relationship with the White House, all the way up to the president and his cabinet. Maybe some select cabinet members, not so much. That's fine. But with this cabinet member, he has a good relationship with, and the president. So I think that's the big takeaway. Tesla can help inform this process and do something that's great for the whole sector. He's got the right priorities. Secretary Duffy talking about safety is the number one priority. So I think this is set up well. And to me, this was an overhang on the stock that will get cleared up. There's other overhangs out there. Hopefully those will get cleared up as well. But to me, this was one of them.
And I think on the timing side, to Jeff's point, that's the starting point, not the end point. And just my gut feeling would be, I would not bet on federal regulations actually being done and really being helpful sooner than in 2 years. I think that's the fastest. If you start it now until you have that actually penetrate all the states and everything, I think the earliest is 2 years or something. But that's perfect, right? If that actually works, because you can navigate the states in the meantime and scale. And to this point, domestic versus imported, I think that's just another example how government works or doesn't work. I think you just have all these random things layering above each other until they make no sense anymore, because everyone puts something in. That was probably some foreign car makers lobbying, and then they said, oh, that would be a great provision, and it's in, and suddenly nothing makes sense anymore.
Yeah, sounds right. Okay,
my sense is that there's a couple things. Tesla's had a lot of time to think about this, right? To build out how the Robotaxi network is going to work, and then of course how they're going to approach the ramp. My guess is that they've played out all kinds of different scenarios in terms of various state approval versus others. I mean, that's how I would approach it. I would get the team together and say, okay, what are the odds of getting California approval by December? If that doesn't happen, then what's plan B, plan C, plan D, plan E, right? You go through all the different scenarios and you map out a plan that's going to work. In terms of the Austin event, they're going to have a problem if there's only 10 to 20 vehicles, right? Because I think thousands of people are going to show up and want to experience this. I think most Tesla shareholders want to have a big event in Austin. And if Tesla doesn't create one, I think that shareholders will create their own. And so I hope that very quickly they have more than 10 to 20 vehicles in Austin for this rollout.
I mean, I thought about this too, because I have my target of like, it needs to be more than 100. Saturation would be at 2,000 in Austin to actually knock out Uber. And when Elon said that, he explicitly said on day one. So I think if you put yourself into the Elon and Tesla shoes, if you roll this out the first time, you want to basically day one observe everything. If it works, I think the scaling could happen very quickly, right? You can basically say in week one, okay, let's make it 100. So far, nothing goes wrong. Let's put on 100. And that's also the beauty. We will get to Waymo later. But I mean, there is no problem for Tesla to put in like 100,000 if they needed to, right? They're just there. And I think this pace of scaling will be dramatically faster. But I would be very nervous if I wasn't two on day one. It's like, I don't know exactly what's going to happen. So let's put them on 20, watch them very closely for 24 hours. But if that's fine, why don't make it 40 on day two? I think that's the approach.
You know, from a product launch perspective, and from having experience doing this in the mobile phone world for a long time, there's a controlled way to do this. And I think we've only heard pieces of it. I think Tesla has a broader plan. They're probably not going to tell us everything. But if I'm in their shoes and they don't need to hear anything from me for, say, how to do this, I would actually have vehicles under embargo, basically. I'd have the whole process under embargo. I would still have the 10 to 20 for public use, you know, very close eye on those, but I would have more vehicles. And I'd say, hey, look, you know, shareholders, if we're having for example, we're having our shareholder meeting maybe in that month, you know, we would have more vehicles, but oh, by the way, you're going to sign a release, just like we sign a release anytime you're going to an event to experience a new vehicle or a new experience. You know, you'd sign a release. Basically, like if you have an issue, you work through it. And there's things you just disclose or not disclose. Anyway, if you're launching something that's it's a new service, it's a new software, it's a new product, you're bringing all these things together. Invariably, you're going to have issues. And what you don't want people focused on are one-off issues that can be, you know, it can be resolved in a few minutes or an hour. You really want them focused on this transformational experience that's launching. That's what you want. So to Cern's point, I think you would want as many people as possible, but I think the way to deal with that, and they're probably going to have a whole series of auto bloggers, YouTubers, so forth, that are also be under some embargo, you know, leading up in this event as well. So I think there's going to be this whole plan. And like I said, that 10 to 20 would be very dynamic. And I think they would, the thing about Tesla is they're not hardware limited, and they're actually not economically limited to add hardware. Everybody else that's doing something like this is actually economically limited, either in hardware or in mapping and the streets that they can be on. And that actually limits the economics of their whole business model. Tesla has more of Tesla's self-constraining themselves just to make sure the technology, you know, we're bringing all these things together at the same time, that it just gets off on the right foot.
I think the 10 to 20 is what they're probably doing now in Austin with the employees.
Yes.
So you just take the same 10 to 20, but expand it, and then do very, very slowly, weeks and weeks. And then you go, okay, I'll add another 10. But like you said, there's not hardware restricted. They've got hundreds of Model Ys sitting there. Once they feel ready, they'll turn that on because they're using regular Model Ys. That's one thing he said, like, we're just using the normal Model Ys that's out there, right? And so that tells me it wasn't, you know, specially equipped with AI5. It wasn't specially equipped with extra sensors. It's what they already have.
Yeah, and just one quick comment about the new Model Y. I had the chance, I'm demo driving one now, and I've owned all the Tesla vehicles before. This is going to be such a special Robotaxi vehicle because it's so smooth. The car is unbelievably smooth for this price tier, for something you could potentially get under $40,000. This vehicle, when it's being driven properly by FSD and they have all this cleanup, all the sensors in the car, they understand how to make, Tesla's doing two things at the same time. They're doing multiple things at the same time. One of the things they're doing besides getting rid of the interventions is they're making the ride smoother. They talked about the coffee cup test, and even showed holding a full cup of coffee or water. So if you feel the suspension on the new Model Y, and the comfort of the seats and everything, this thing is going to be, it's going to feel like you're being driven by a professional limousine driver. It's going to be such a good experience. I can't overemphasize that enough. So I know people want to see more cybercabs out there, and I think those will start, making their appearance, but that would just be another variable for Tesla to deal with. If I'm doing a launch that's this complex, where I've got cleaning, I've got fleet management, I've got new software, I've got a new app I've got to run on mobile, I've got all these things working together. The thing that it could be a killer was just like, now I have a prototype, engineering prototype vehicle that I'm putting out there. Too many variables. They may have one, but they'll limit it, but then they'll start bringing those in, I think, as they get more supply. But first, limit the variables, limit the quantity, get it right, and then expand. Remember, Tesla is one of the most talked about products on the internet, and one of the most talked about companies on the internet. So you've got to be very careful with the rollout.
Yeah, and I think, when I was first very disappointed when they said only Model Y in the call, but within like minutes, I was, calibrating my brain to, okay, fine, it's not Cybercab. But to Jeff's point, that's exactly right. I thought like that solves so many problems. The entire risk of introducing a completely new prototype, maybe hand manufactured in the beginning, goes away. It's just perfectly, manufactured standard Model Ys. And that just makes this scaling from deploying 10 or 20 within 24 hours, you can just have 100 or scale it back again. So you're completely seamless how you can scale this.
Yeah. Then you add the Cybercab later, which is a brand new thing that you've never really driven very outside of the Giga Texas, and then test that out slowly. Okay.
Exactly.
We'll come back to this, but there's a big story we should get to right off the bat. So the next big news story that came out was, looks like that FSD, full self-driving, not only approved in Canada, United States, Puerto Rico, Mexico, China, now Norway as well. Here's the first entry into Europe. Thank you to Keith Rolandskap, who's been keeping us updated to everything that's happening. He said this: Tesla just secured a 2-year exemption to run FSD supervised on public roads in Norway. Not theory, not simulation, but with real cars, live software, and government oversight. Approved by Norwegian Road Authority. This test program allows FSD version 13, modified steering and speed control. I don't know what that means. Tesla trained drivers only, okay, on registered EU type approved vehicles. So Tesla trained drivers only, that means it's just Tesla owners, Tesla employees, I guess, on registered EU owners. This is the approval. So that's the first step, exemption. Cern, what else do you know about this?
Well, further down in Case's post, he does clarify that and says it's run only by safety-trained Tesla employees initially. So this is really just a way for the regulators to gather some data and get comfortable with how this operates in their country. So it's a great first step, but I don't believe it's will allow Tesla owners in Norway to utilize FSD just yet. Now, that could change fairly quickly. I would imagine the regulators could get comfortable pretty fast with this. So it's a positive first step in what looked like, Europe as a whole was really dragging. Also further down in the post, Case also indicates that maybe 3 more countries in the EU that are testing FSD supervised with regulatory approval and oversight. So that may be future news here in the coming weeks. So at least there's finally movement in the EU towards, testing and hopefully approval of supervised FSD.
Mm-hmm.
And that's also exactly to that ripple effect theory that I have, what Cern just said. I mean, I know the Europeans a little bit. So if Norway does it and you're Sweden, you just get into trouble with your people. They say, what are we doing? Look at the Norwegians. And then the Dutch come and so on. And so I think, once one domino falls in a region like that, that's very culturally interconnected. I mean, there's a ripple effect. You can't just not do it.
Yeah. So Norway and then Netherlands, right? Is that coming soon?
It's likely to be one of the other 2 or 3 countries that's on the list. Yes.
This looks like approval to test. This doesn't look like these are type approved vehicles, probably serialized test drivers. So this is, you can put it out on the road with test drivers. So I think it's a good first step.
That's fantastic. This is it. Everything's moving forward. So Tesla bears, right? They think that Elon is just making promises, but we continue seeing progress. this is the progress we're hoping for, right? Step by step, it's happening. Anything you guys are thinking about in terms of the Robotaxi launch details that we saw when they announced that the employees are testing this right now in San Francisco Bay Area, in Austin? There's sightings of Model Ys driving all over Austin right now. And then they showed you the actual video that I was playing, right? The actual app. Anybody have a comment about what you saw there with how it's actually being done in the app itself?
I think it's just super calming me down, my concerns, to see any of these things happening, because we have to consider this is a highly complex rollout with all kinds of moving parts, not just the car, not just FSD, but also maintenance, everything, the app, how people ordered, are they happy with everything? So the faster, like now, we can test that system from all sides, the actual commercial operation with ordering and everything, the more chill I am that they will figure it out. So all these things need to be debugged.
Yeah, you'll hear me say this over and over again. We talked 99% about approvals and testing and look at this video and when's the next release coming out. But really, honestly, the thing that's most unique about what Tesla is doing is the business model, and where they're so far and away ahead of anybody that calls themselves a robotaxi or calls themselves doing anything related to assisted driving. So not only will the performance be better, and there's milestones to get to that, and there's work that they have to do, but what's on the other side of that is what the analyst and what the media and even us sometimes we're guilty of. We'd spend the least amount of time on, which is the underlying business model. How the low cost of capital, the fact that there are millions of these vehicles already deployed, the fact that Tesla is vertically integrated from the base layer of silicon all the way to that cleaning head that's going to be used to clean the screen in the vehicle and that robotic arm, that's all engineered by Tesla. They're not paying somebody for that service. They're not paying somebody to design silicon and software for them like others have to do. Others have to pay NVIDIA. They have to pay NVIDIA that 70% and dial that into their unit economics. They have to pay NVIDIA for software licenses for CUDA. Tesla is in a completely different position with the service they're building, and that's going to yield a robotaxi service that's going to cost a fraction of everything that's out there. And then that just blows up the TAM. And now all of a sudden the TAM is much greater than people could even imagine or even put into a spreadsheet. So I think that's where the conversation is going to turn once people see these things swarming in the streets.
Yeah, and I think it's, in the end, that's beautifully put. In the end, it's, The Matrix, I love the movie. We see all these surface level things like, oh, there's great tech and there's a screen and there's this and that. But in the end, only one thing counts. Does this thing cost less than $1 per mile? Right? It's the economics. And that $1 per mile thing, everything flows into that number. Right? For example, if you have in theory, even a cheap car, like how many of these cars do you have? Do you need to hand calibrate your stuff that you're plugging on that car like Waymo? That costs you money. How do you map the streets? You have to map everything that adds to it, right? Then if all these things hinder you from scaling, then you have a non-scaled operation that's much more expensive. So it's actually much more complicated how you get to that single number. And that's why Waymo sucks so much. They're so far away from that number, and they have to overcome so many insurmountable obstacles to get to that number that they're simply not a competitor. That's what I'm always saying. Whereas Tesla has basically figured it all already out. It's just the missing piece in the middle is the technology. That's why I'm so focused with them on that thing. They have to solve that last thing, because the rest, Tesla has an insurmountable advantage, in my opinion.
Let's talk about that.
And also, by the way, one funny thing is that Bill Ackman and people like that, I don't even view Waymo as a big competitor, but what about Uber and Hertz? Can they do it? And then this argument that Uber has this great advantage with their app and the user base. Like, are you kidding me? You put this on X, you have 600 million users, right? Within a second, right? So they have immense access to users, to demand, and figuring out how to do the software that matches supply and demand. I think that's very trivial for them.
Let's listen to Elon, because at the earnings call, he talked about 99% ownership. or market share?
Ironically, we're the ones that made the bet that a pure AI solution with cameras and audio, the car actually will listen for sirens and that kind of thing, is the right move. And Waymo decided that an expensive sensor suite was the way to go, even though Google's very good at AI.
Yeah, so that was very odd, right? That he pointed it out. First of all, Waymo costs way more money. He said that we're going to maybe get it to 99%, over 90% of market share, because by next year we might have millions of cars that are autonomous. Unless you can tell me another competitor that might have millions of cars, I don't see who they might be. Then he said, yeah, he explained a comment about Waymo, which is very odd because Google is the leader in AI, and yet they decided to go LiDAR approach, LiDAR heavy, instead of really relying on the neural nets and vision to really understand the world, which they may have chosen the wrong path, but that's what he's saying. Well, it's weird. We had to build these AI teams from scratch, both hardware and software. And here we are, and we're proving that it works. But yeah, pretty bold statements. 99% of the market. I don't know. He might have meant at the first year, right? Eventually they'll come. But
it's kind of the opposite of that, actually, because you might have some competition in the beginning, but over time, the scale advantages destroy any competitors. Right? This is just not going to be much of an opportunity unless you want to come to market with something and compete at 50 cents a mile or something. Then good luck. Right? You're just going to be losing a lot of money. It's like what we've seen with the EV makers, right? Tesla went through that phase. They lost a bunch of money. They came out of that chasm and started to make profits. There's been no other EV maker, with the exception perhaps of BYD, although they're heavily subsidized by the Chinese government. No other EV maker that's successfully gone through that chasm and got to the point where the unit economics actually work. And I think the same may also be true of Robotaxi, perhaps even to a greater degree. It's going to be even harder for anybody to break into that business. Not to mention the fact that who is actually building an FSD type system that really competes with Tesla? Have we seen anybody yet? I mean, some Chinese companies that are attempting to do it.
There's 4 that started the neural net with supercomputers last year. But that was like, they're just starting. They're nowhere near. Yeah.
And Tesla's been at this for so long, and it's, people have a lot of frustration about how long it's taken Tesla. Well, Elon's promised this every single year for the last several years. Well, the Chinese are going to have to go through the same kind of issue. Mm-hmm. It's going to take time.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Cern. Apologize.
Go ahead, Jeff.
I was going to say, if you unconstrain your hardware cost model, there are things that you could push out the door faster. And if you constrain the where it can work, if you say, well, I have to design something that just goes up and down my street, like there's constraints you could put on, but then you don't have the scale, you don't have the business model. And I honestly think this is what Tesla held on and said, what's the solution that scales? What's the solution that serves billions of people concurrently? And they've held on for that solution. I have to keep my cost structure this low. I've got to vertically integrate in these areas. I can't depend on partnerships because they're not going to be able to keep up with the kind of scale I'm doing. I want to produce something that's a fraction of the cost. And one of the things I find interesting about the greater than 90% share, I know there's a lot of bears that are laughing at this. I actually think Tesla may not. It's going to be in all these situations. It's actually more about margin share. They may not actually want. If they have 99% share, they're going to be setting all the pricing everywhere. Whereas if they actually allow some others in, they can actually keep pricing high and keep margins high. So there's going to be this interesting trade-off, but they're going to be clearly in the driver's seat. And this is why Uber has been.
I thought there's no driver.
Yeah, no pun intended.
You can't say that. They're not in the driver's seat.
No. This whole thing's going to be a utilization model. It's going to be fascinating. That's what Uber's trying to do right now with all these partners. They're trying to get their utilization up, get the network, get very high utilization. And if they see Tesla come on at a much lower price point, it's going to siphon that utilization away from them. It's going to make their fixed cost a lot higher, and it's going to be a real problem for anyone else. So this is why this is so disruptive. It's going to take some time to get there. It's going to take time you see how long it's taking for analysts to see this. But I do think some of this is obviously getting built into the multiple today. We're sitting here at a very high multiple. So it's unfair to say that some of this isn't already built in, because it clearly is. So now it's really about execution and scaling.
Yeah, and I think to that point, I'm surprised by the analysts actually, because I think they all kind of get it. Like Dan Ives gets it, and Adam Jonas and Piper. Like Tesla, if you would view it as an auto company, I think the fair price would be roughly around 150, and that would still assume no problems ahead, right, in terms of scaling the core business. So the fact that they're all having 350, 400 price targets means they have fully anticipating this. I think they are not fully anticipating how huge this is, because, Jeff, to your point, I think what people don't really understand yet is how enormous a sub $1 per mile infrastructure of autonomous vehicles actually is. We're talking about tens of millions of cars, which no one sees right now because they're saying, oh, it replaces Uber. Like, no, it's like car demand. Once you drop that price below $1, you're not doubling the TAM, you're 20-folding the TAM, because suddenly it's a completely different behavior. Then people say, I don't need to own a car anymore. There are millions of robotaxis. Wait time on average is 2 minutes. I say, get me from here to there. I'm paying $4 for 5 miles. Are you kidding me? I'm no bus anymore, no train, no car. I don't need that stuff. I just always order my little robotaxi. And that's not a fantasy. I think at the millisecond where this stuff really works, which could happen in 2026, like super reliability, they press a button and you have 200,000 robotaxis in the greater Houston area or something. So this can happen very rapidly now because of all the scaling effects that Tesla has, once that tech is absolutely bulletproof. And I think that can happen in the next 18 months, the bulletproof tech. And that would be nuts. And I think that's going to happen to the stock, because then it's not a $350 stock anymore. Then you're on the path to 10,000. And, once you see, wait, they just unlock more and more. Now it's 100,000, now it's 500,000, now it's 1 million. I think then people will get it.
In Adam Jonas's model, he's assuming 1,000 robotaxis at the end of 2026, 2,000 by the end of 27, 5,000 by the end of 2028. They're scaling this thing like you have to hand build all these cars, right?
And two Optimus robots in 2040.
Yeah. So Joe, to your point, I think Wall Street gets it, but they also don't. Now they're being very cautious, and maybe maybe they should be, because this has been a long time coming, right? But at some point, they're going to be overly cautious, and they're going to be raising their price targets faster than the next analyst. They're going to be racing to raise these price targets when they actually build into their model what's actually happening on the ground. And right now, right now they don't really have the courage of their conviction to do that. And then Joe, just to build on what you said about the TAM massively expands, yes, when you lower the price. But you know what also happens? You get a brand new TAM with new businesses that can be layered on top of this. It's Absolutely. Not just giving rides that's the TAM. It's delivery. It's all kinds of other services and things that you can do with a low-cost transportation system that is not even possible today.
And this is the ARK Invest spreadsheet or chart that Elon keeps saying he really appreciates this, the analysis they've done on ride hailing. And what they say here is that if ride hail competes with the existing ride hail, like Uber and Lyft, we're talking about $134 billion market. That's a $2 to $4 per mile charge. But once you go outside of Western markets, you're talking about $1 trillion market. And then once you start doing things at 60 cents a mile, you're at 2.4 trillion. This is no longer the 134 billion, 2.4 trillion. Then you start getting into the 5 trillion once you get to 25 cents per mile.
Yeah, and I think to Cern's point, it's very important to not commit the horses, carriages mistake, because I think this is not just like inventing the car and replacing the horses and unlocking suddenly trucks and things like that. It's like replacing horses with a combination of trains and cars, because you have a new infrastructure. It's a new transportation infrastructure of enormous proportions. And I can't even imagine what you can build on top of that, but a lot of things. right? It's all kinds of crazy things. Imagine you have basically abundant free transportation for $1 a mile or 90 cents. I mean, there's no end what you could do with it. So I think the societal transformation is underrated. Everyone just thinks, oh, it replaces Uber. I think it does much more. And it does much more very quickly because, also to Jeff's point, that whole drop of costs, it's the same way Tesla thinks about Optimus, that all these robo fans don't understand why Optimus is so special. Optimus is not special because it can beat every single robot how it runs in his hands, right? Maybe there will always be one robot that's better in something than Optimus. It's about the entire larger infrastructure, supply chain ecosystem and sales, like the whole thing. No one has the whole thing. And for Robotaxi, it's even more true right now. And that just allows them to be much faster to get to massive scale. It just hinges on their tech, right? So when does this thing really work? But I think, I mean, Herbert, you convinced me. I'm the critic here, but Herbert says you're using hardware for version.
Let's go around the panel here. Like, when does this work? Okay, first of all, let's define what you mean by when does this work. I think there's 2 milestones that you need to hit. The first one is 10,000 miles between critical engagement. That is representative of what it is for a human. A single driver driving for 1 year typically drives 10,000 miles or 15,000 miles. If you can have one critical disengagement, one accident per year. Now, that's not good enough. You need to get to, I think, 700,000 miles. So it's a magnitude change before you get to like 10 times safer than a human. So when does it get there? And that's where you can kind of hear this point about, we don't even know where we're at, Elon is kind of saying, because it takes so long. You have to drive 10,000 miles to know if you have a critical disengagement. It feels like that's where we're at today. It's like what I got the sense of, but you need to be a lot more. So when do we get there? Well, I'm driving 13.2 right now, and personally, I have not had a disengagement for over 3 months, and I drive once a day minimum. That's at least 2 ride-hail drives, honestly, from my home to a place, a restaurant, and back, and so forth. And so theoretically, I could have been taking, 2 times 90 days, 180 ride-hail trips, and I've been fine. Now, that's not good enough, right? You got to get the max. So when do you get that movement? Well, the good news is that it's based on compute. So once increase the compute, then you can hit that milestone. How do we know that? Because in the last years, we've seen 10x and 1,000x improvements in miles between critical disengagements because as they increase compute. So maybe they're there already. Maybe they'll take another round before we get there, or maybe 2 more releases. It could be over a year from now to get there. But it's no longer if, it's now when, and I'm very comfortable that it's going to happen within a year as opposed to saying 5 years from now or never to get there. But it sounds like that Tesla is going to move forward in June, and then they're going to increase the scale if nothing happens, so that they're willing to do these kind of controlled, situations. And I was telling you that, maybe they'll limit it to the first 6 months just to a certain geography. And I know I'm going to get hit by all these Tesla fans out there. No, they'll never do geofence. But that's what Waymo did. When they first launched, they only did grid cities just to reduce the chances of any major accidents. Tesla might do that for the first month or 2 months or something like that, just to slowly get out there until they really feel comfortable. But if you hear Elon, he's saying unsupervised FSD by the end of this year. So that's him, though. That's his statements. Only he has said that. So
there's a couple of things that I would mention here, Herbert. One is, if you recall that chart by Frida Duan that showed the progression of FSD relative to a human driver, and how she thought with the next version, that would be the leap that would get you above a human driver. So I call that version 14. It's been a while since we've seen a new version. We're due for one. So she's expecting that the next one gets us there generally. Now, of course, there's city by city differences that you have to solve for to some degree. The other thing I would mention too, it's not just the amount of compute that you have, but it's compute times time.
Time and compute. Yeah.
It's the area under that curve that matters.
Yep.
And I think AJ did some good work on this in terms of showed that by, I forget what date it was, May or June, that there would have enough time, enough area under that curve to get you to that new version that should make it better than the average human. Now, of course, that's just a milestone along the road. They're still going to iterate and make it better and better again. So this whole notion, I think, of being better than a human is kind of this artificial one, right? We're going to pass that milestone. We're going to look back and say, okay, that's history. Now the objective is just to make it as safe and reliable as possible. And that process is going to continue for some time. And Tesla is highly incentivized to continue that, because every single accident is going to cost them money, right? The lawsuits and the legal costs and the settlement fees potentially of people that do die in a robotaxi. And let's be honest, it will happen. It may not be the robotaxi's fault. And the good news is that the thing is festooned with cameras and so on. So we'll get to see exactly what happened, whose fault it is. But Tesla's still going to have to deal with each and every one of those accidents. And so that process of iterating on FSD is going to continue. But I think that probably, I agree with Frida. I think the next version will probably there. So call it June, July.
Yeah, I think I'd put some safety buffer in there, because I'm always skeptical, because I have to make sure my stocks work out. So my trades. So I'm rather being a little conservative on that side, but it's either the next one or the next one, but it's pretty much guaranteed the third one. So I would say there is just no possible scenario where, version 15 or something, 15 or 16 is not there. And that has to happen in the next 15 months. I think there is a good shot. It's just now, right in June. But I think we are right at this inflection point. I'm pretty convinced. By the way, my crazy theory is, I haven't heard that yet from anyone else. My crazy theory is that Tesla has an insurmountable lead right now on the core tech FSD. But I do think we will see commoditization of self-driving much sooner out of left field than people expect, around 2029 or something, because of AGI. I think there will be just ChatGPT saying, by the way, if you take your iPhone, put it in your windshield, it's just self-driving completely.
Automatically. It just figures it out, right?
So I think that is going to happen because of this vastly exponential insanity that's happening on the totally different side. So I think in 2030 or something, you will have complete commoditization. But then you have, of course, if they have then millions of robotaxis and the brand and the app and install base, and the others can be cheaper, they will still have a massive moat. But I think the core tech will be commoditized in the next 5 years, probably by people who are not even trying that hard. I mean, I think it's going to come out of left field somehow from some super AI.
I think it's going to go back to the business model, though. So I think both things can be true, but it's going to come back to the business model, the vertical integration, and the approach. But there will be other entrants, and I think it could come out of left field. I keep going back to one of the biggest thing from the bears is, like, Elon's been saying this for 10 years that it's coming. Again, now we have we have a set of definitive dates. It's not this ambiguous this year versus next year, and we have a lot of confidence up and down the chain from the team. And now we have something that actually scales. I actually think we needed to get through what we were doing on NVIDIA silicon and then switching to our own silicon, not being on end-to-end and trying to do this with heuristics. I actually think the team needed to go through all of these permutations to get to this end-to-end model approach. And now we have actually something that can scale with compute, to your point, Herbert. So I'm very excited to see the next model after 13.2 and what kind of improvement, and also what new features has Tesla still has features that have to be implemented. We have to be able to deal with school zones. We have to be able to deal with sirens. We have to be able to deal with, backing in and out of garages and things like that. So there's still feature work that has to be done. I also think there's a tremendous amount of security work that I don't know where they're at. I'm sure that they're thinking about all these things, but you think about hacking the app, the network, and all the different things that they have to guard against. I think Tesla does a very good job at that, but there'll be a lot of work to do around the security of the infrastructure and the whole system to make sure it's secure. All the different test cases for the vehicle as well. People are going to try to there may be people that try to do a number of things to these vehicles as well. So Tesla has to think through all these different use cases, and so it's the uncomfortable stuff to talk about, but it's the things that they have to think about. And I'm sure they have a lot of people thinking through that. But right now, to me, it's really getting the feature complete and getting those interventions down and getting the ride smoothness to where it needs to be. And I do think next year is just going to be an unbelievable experience. But I think we're going to have a couple of really big leaps that we may see in the next month or two, and then eventually getting to unsupervised on our own vehicles by the end of the year. Just sit back and think about that for a minute. You're gonna be able to get into your car, say a few words, it's going to take off and drive, and you're going to be able to look at your phone, read an article or something in the magazine, and you're going to be able to arrive somewhere, fully refreshed in the car. I mean, just think about that. It's already crazy right now just to get in your car, say a few words, and it starts driving. You have to be attentive. Yep. Just think how that's this year potentially.
And think about what that does to the orders for Tesla's auto business.
Yes.
Right. People are going to be buying Teslas to get access to that. People that aren't doing that today, once they see that is something they can do where they can fall asleep in their car, that is going to be explosive growth for auto sales for Tesla.
And I don't know what you think about it, Cern, on the modeling side, but when I put in subscription percentage adoption change, that has a huge impact on margin. And I think that will happen, of course, if it's unsupervised, it's perfect. And that adoption goes up to 50% of all car owners, Tesla owners, or more. Yeah. That has tremendous effects also on margin. And they are not delayed. They're like boom, there's the money. So I think I'm still most excited about probably the most boring piece of all of that to most people, which is the dollar per mile. Like, I think the transformative effect of having an app, ordering this stuff, and it costs you a third of Uber. It's, of course, it sounds like the most boring thing about it, but this is the big deal, because people will just use it more. Just thinking about the stock and cash.
Yeah. Yep.
Because I had it actually here when I was traveling in Europe, in the Nordics, like in the Baltics, they have Bolt, it's called. And it's so cheap. It's not $1 a mile, it's more. But it's so much. It's always like $6 or something. Go wherever you want. It changes your behavior. You're just like, well, just order this thing all the time. I'm not even thinking twice. And that's not even there. So I think, I'm from a stock strategy perspective, if people, I always like tease people with like, options and stuff. Like, it's good to be a shareholder, but it's good to, if you have a gut feel what's going to happen, you have an alpha, that's good. So I'm always thinking, where is the moment? What is the moment where people just get it? The robo-porn moment. And I think that moment is when these things drive around in Austin. You see it on Instagram or whatever. Everyone takes photos like, look at me, I'm taking a Robotaxi. Oh, it's so cheap, it's so perfect. And the question is, when is that moment? Right. That's
the reason I don't think so. It's like you can basically say that right now with Waymo in 7 cities.
But it's super expensive and it's long wait times.
But in terms of like the moment, it needs to be something more than just somebody's experience. It's got to be something that is visually like blowing people away. And I don't know if the price point alone is going to change the difference between people are already doing Waymo cars, right?
Could be a lot of Model Ys, but it could be cybercabs. I think the cybercabs are just stunning in look. The doors that open, the fact that you get in, you don't even see a steering wheel in the vehicle. These aren't re-engineered or remanufactured vehicles, nor the Model Ys. But I think the cybercab will definitely be part of that moment.
The cybercab for sure, but that's a little late for my taste. So I definitely, the cybercab is going to be the final moment. The question is, can the Model Y pull off a moment like that? If it's a lot of Model Ys, and there is a big difference between, these stupid Waymo cars, they look like science projects. Everyone knows it's fake news, kind of. But if you imagine, you see like 100 white, red, whatever color, like same color Model Ys that are Robotaxis, maybe they have some branding on it or something.
I think the difference is that in Austin, it's Waymo exists, but they have 700 cars over 7 cities, and so it's limited. But imagine when you have 1,000 Teslas that you can order. Now you got thousands of people on a daily basis times 5 per day, right? Now you got all those butts and seats who really going to start talking word of mouth. Now imagine if it goes beyond just the Robotaxi pilot in one city. Now they've got 3 cities, but then what happens when all of our cars gets it, the ability for this FSD unsupervised, that word of mouth will even get even just more. That could be it. Let's talk about the next topic. I thought that was good. You talked about Optimus, this idea that Robotaxi versus Optimus, right? So there's this Robotaxis happening now, right? You've got that mapped out. People are getting excited about it. It's happening in June. Optimus, he did say that it's going to be still in prototype stage. It's going to take a while. He's still very comfortable or confident that we'll get to 1,000 run rate by the end of this year. But he's saying, there's hundreds of thousands of parts. We've never built it before. I can't predict with precision what's going to happen. But you're asking the question of which one of these is going to actually generate, the revenue first. Now, Elon did confirm, he said that by second half of next year, that's when he thinks that the Robotaxi revenue will be moving the needle. Second half of next year, right? Because it's going to be very slow until then. Yeah, you guys want to have that conversation? And,
So Cern, what is I want to know from Cern, because I have my model here. Cern, when does your model show that Optimus overtakes Robotaxi in EBITDA in margin?
Yeah, Herbert, the next chart actually may be a little easier to see it in terms of percentage. Yeah. So here I've got Robotaxi revenue in blue. So if we're looking at Q2 of 2026, just to go back to Herbert's point, you can see that's kind of the third blue bar there at the top. So I've kind of got it showing up there in Q4 of 25. But right there, yeah, there's Q2 of 26. So that's pretty meaningful. And you can see then the growth from there. And then I've got Optimus kind of, maybe 3 or 4 quarters behind it, but pretty quickly.
So you have
Optimus is yellow.
Okay.
This is the yellow, right?
Yeah, and this is revenue. So, profitability is a different thing, but, they're pretty close to being at the same time. But I think now if I was to rerun these numbers again, I think I would be a little bit more cautious on Optimus and a little bit more aggressive on Robotaxi.
Yeah, I have like a different, for me, at least on the EBITDA side, it takes until 2035 before Optimus overtakes
Really?
Robotaxi. I became
What?
much more.
Yeah,
I
no.
became more bullish on
Dude,
Robotaxi.
okay. Well,
But then
first
it
of all,
goes very
let's-
steep. For me,
let's-
it's more. For me, it's very. It takes a long time before Optimus overtakes it, but then it's like through the roof. Then it's like a very steep.
I think we need to debate or discuss what is your numbers, right? So in Optimus, let's say that they make the first 5,000, 10,000, that they're now outside of using it themselves and they're going to sell this. I would tell you, my numbers would be that it's $100,000 per year per bot, not 30,000 for the first 5,000 bots.
It's a very interesting discussion because I have very low numbers and I have very high bot deployment numbers. And I think that will be the question, the strategic question. Do you make this a $12,000 a year robot as a service? Or do you make it a $40,000, $60,000? Like, are you going after hundreds of millions of bots as quickly as possible by making them disruptively cheap?
Both.
Or
what do you, just that the need. So first of all Fortune 500 companies are demanding robots now. They're calling every robot company. So it's going to be supply constrained for years, 5 years, maybe, longer. So every bot that a robot manufacturer makes, they'll find a buyer for it, and they can charge not $30,000, they can charge $100,000 per year. That's my thesis.
Joe, if you sell me a bot for $40,000, I'm going to buy as many as I can, and I'm going to start a business of deploying those bots and making even more money with that. So if you're Tesla, you don't want this kind of gray market of people doing that. You want to make sure that you're capturing the revenue potential. Right. And in a supply constrained market, if I'm a manufacturing company and I've got, 3 shifts, I'm willing to pay $100,000, $120,000 a year for that thing. Right. Because that's saving me probably half of my labor cost. Right. So in the beginning, as long as it's supply constrained, once it's not supply constrained, the cost of the bot drops rapidly.
But wouldn't it be quickly not like, isn't that a very scalable product once you have it nailed down? Like by 2033 or 32, it should be highly scalable.
Agreed.
Yes, by then, sure.
Yes. Agreed.
Yeah. But I think in the first 5 or so years, I could easily see revenue of 100, 120,000 per bot.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah, I think I
Per
agree.
year.
So, I mean, I probably
Per year.
I have to change my model to be more aggressive, high priced for the first 5 years or something. But I think then you go really into it gets competitive, or you want to drive it down.
But my theory is that by that point, just like the iPhone, you're no longer selling the iPhone, you're selling the App Store. You're selling the apps, and then you're selling services, and you're selling tasks on demand. You're selling, all sorts of other things beyond just the hardware cost.
The thing that we didn't have to encounter in the smartphone world ramping, and that was an industry that went from the hundreds of thousands to millions to eventually over 1 billion. The thing that we didn't have to encounter that I think we are going to encounter here is some sort of regulatory tax framework. We had regulatory for sure, no question, safety, everything. And there was cost that we had to build into our products. But I think there's going to be, I don't even know how to think about it yet, but I don't know if we're just going to have carte blanche, as many robots as you can build, deploy them. I think there's going to be some sort of thing going on with governments where we have to think about the introduction. Invariably, I think there's things we're not going to do right in terms of retraining people and moving people into other disciplines prior. I just don't think we're going to get ready for this. And there could be some sort of regulatory tax overhang just to start thinking about. I don't know how you model it. I think it's all over the place. It's going to be different by country and region. I don't know. It's one of those problems that there's not a clear answer to yet, but it's just something to, put in the parking lot and start thinking about.
This is something actually that I've been giving quite a bit of thought. And here's my current thinking on this. Because humanoid bots and frankly, Robotaxi is so deflationary, not to mention just AI in general. And this is why I don't think it's necessarily going to be a robot tax, because it's just AI in general. It's not just robots. Yeah. The deflation from this technology is going to be so massive, and you're going to start putting people out of work. These people need to feed themselves. Also, if you are a government that is heavily indebted, you do not want deflation. Right? Because you do not want to pay off that debt with deflating dollars. So governments are just going to print money and give it to the people because the people need it. And they also need to do that in order to keep enough inflation in the economy. We're going to see money printing like we've never seen before.
I totally agree. I think,
to me, that's the only way out of this in the short term is for governments to print money. Now, the problem is you do not want to be holding currency because in a world where everything is abundant, it's worthless, and everything that's scarce has really high value. So the scarcity premium on those assets that are truly scarce goes way up, right?
Bitcoin on Tesla, that's what you need to hold.
There you go.
My Pokemon cards.
No, but
right.
I think
some real estate, certain markets, highly scarce, oceanfront property, whatever is desirable. Mm-hmm. Those assets, the scarcity premium on that's going to go even higher because that's where the money ends up flowing from everything else that's just becoming abundant and dirt cheap to the assets that remain scarce. But I think the answer is just the government's going to print money, Jeff, until they can no longer print.
We also have generally this problem. So that's super interesting, by the way. I haven't thought of it that explicitly. I think, Cern, you're totally right. And on top of that, you will have income tax implosion. Right, because people won't have jobs. So it's not just deflation. You also will have a breakdown of revenue for the government. So yeah, I think we are dealing with more like an event horizon problem. This is singularity around 2029, where it's just impossible to predict what's actually going to happen to all these countries.
Yeah,
because I think the impact is so much bigger than people even realize by 2028 already. Like it's not just bots, it's also AI. Like just general AGI going into enterprise and destroying white collar jobs. They will be the first that get wiped out. And that's a lot of jobs. And they will get wiped out so much faster, so much more radically. And all these effective, how are they called? These accelerationists that are promising us, there's the new technology. There are always more jobs. This is all dumb talk. Like this time is different. This is not a random technology. This is intelligence. And I mean, I think it's going to be some enormous shit show of some sort that is impossible to exactly predict, even though I think Cern is right. Like some things are clear. They need to print money, but that doesn't mean the governments are stable, more the opposite. Right. So I think there's massive wealth concentration in Tesla. That's why we should own shares, but also NVIDIA, the Bitcoin stuff. And then we are accelerating into the event horizon in the next 4 years.
That's a good cliffhanger, Herbert, for your next show.
Yes.
So,
yeah.
By the way, for the viewers who don't know what the event horizon is basically the point, like if you're at a black hole where you can't look beyond that because the light is not coming out anymore. You can basically not see what's behind that thing. And I think that's where we really are. That's why we can project some first principle things like, okay, inflation, they need to print money. There will be massive capital concentration in the winners, of course, and which is a whole bunch of companies. And a lot of people will have no jobs. And there will be some sort of UBI, but that's not great.
Yeah, so I'll be interviewing Tony Seba, and Cern will be joining me next week. And he wrote a book called Stellar. Cern and I did a show, a fantastic book, fantastic kind of exploration of what could happen when you have these 5 stellar technologies that are just going to change. And basically his thesis is that not only is the technology going to change, humanity, society, but everything about society is going to change. Like our government, is it democracy? Is it, do we need judges? Do we need Supreme Courts? Those kind of things will all change dramatically. So the changes are much bigger than we realize.
And my criticism of these projections into the future is they're often done by people who are too constructive and optimistic, and they forget that this is the real world, right? So it's like, oh, abundance, we can put the AI and we have all these great judges. The reality is what happens if you take the jobs away from 90% of Americans in 2028 next election?
Revolution, fights.
Do you think they're just going to say invent great AI judges? No, there's some major problem.
Okay, whoa, that was, it got serious there really quickly. But basically we started off with 2 major news stories. We got the federal framework is being worked on for self-driving. You've got this first, foothold into Norway for FSD in Norway. And then you've got movement in terms of Robotaxi this year. Things are moving fast for Tesla. I mean, sometimes we think it's going slow, but actually progress can jump very quickly. And here we are. Things are looking good. So great panel as always. Alexandra is away in Europe right now this month, so Cern will be replacing, taking her place for the next several shows. And then thank you for joining us today, Joe. That was fantastic. Appreciate you. And always, Jeff Lutz.
Thanks, Joe.
Man. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thanks, Cern. Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Herbert.
Yeah.
Thanks, Herbert.
I've created a website that is the most comprehensive resource for the Tesla investor. Please check it out. Simply go to my website at herbertong.com.